Hi folks, my name's Gheeotine, and welcome to this week's Build Showcase. Last week I said that gaming on almost any budget was possible and that I would be returning to showcase my own hyper-budget build, but not just any hyper-budget. For inspiration, I looked to the Linus Tech Tips channel, and more specifically, their $69 build. I've linked that video in the description if you haven't seen it already, but I wanted to similarly do my own as a personal challenge. Linus has been doing PC-related stuff for decades, while I'm a random jackoff who only got into PC building this last May after making a poor financial decision. So if anything, I'm trying to illustrate that if I can do stuff like this, then so can you. Which is where we enter today. I, Gheeotine, take on the $69 PC build challenge. There are 3 simple rules. 1. I have a budget of $69 to spend on parts for the PC, and I am not allowed to go over unless I sell a part from the computer to make up the difference. That's only for the tower and its internal components, though. Monitors, peripherals, and other such accessories are not being included, but of a quick side note, you can often find those things for extremely cheap, if not free, on the local marketplace websites, if not yard sales or even dumpsters if you know the right location. Number 2. Shipping, while it is important to consider, is not considered part of the budget today, primarily due to its subjective nature. There are many places that can offer free shipping, or it can be entirely mitigated through direct meetings or pickup. 3, and finally, once the machine is made, it has to be able to play games with a fair degree of stability. Obviously, it's going to have limitations on modern games that have heavy hardware requirements, but nonetheless, if it can game with confidence, then the project is a success. That's it. Those are the 3 rules. With that established, let's look at our foundation. Coming in at a princely $26 at auction on eBay, we have the Dell Optiplex 9020. A commercial computer solution primarily intended for light to midweight office work, made for things like spreadsheets or database work as opposed to workstation PCs used for heavy computing tasks like physics simulations or 3D rendering. These things are abundant, and while they're fairly bare bones, we already have some decent parts. We have a Gen 4 i5 4570 with 4 cores, 4 threads, and 8GB of DDR3 1600 megatransfer RAM. Unfortunately, this being a bare-bones package that needed its storage drive destroyed for security reasons, we have no operating system or storage drive. That'll be the first acquisition, or that's what I would say. Anyone who takes up a new hobby that really vibes will recall going through a honeymoon phase, and I'm no different. This entailed me hoarding a whole mess of components regardless of need, and if I saw a good deal, I was almost guaranteed to get it. That's how I got 2 Samsung 850 EVO 250GB SSDs for a cost of $16, or $8 each. Since we're only going to be using one drive for the build, that puts us to Rule $34. One drive and Windows installation later, followed by a full night of updating to the most current version, we have our system ready to go from a software angle, complete with a selection of games. Granted, it's a small selection, but that could be upgraded in the future easily enough. The Dell Optiplex supports up to 2TB drives, with 2 more SATA ports available. With the operating system and storage drive resolved enough to install 5 decent games and some minor support programs, let's go with a simple upgrade now. While 8GB of RAM is enough to do basic office tasks, for gaming, the wide consensus is that 16GB should be considered for adequate performance in a gaming machine. Fortunately, that's another inexpensive piece. Since Optiplexes are so abundant, that means their parts are equally available. A trip to eBay and $11 later, for a grand total of $45, our machine has 16GB of 1600 megatransfer DDR3 RAM. Next up is the graphics card. If you saw my video last week, there should be no surprise here. I'm entering with a 2GB GTX 960, but not the 2-fan EVGA model I got for $21. If you can believe it, I found a single-fan model for $15.50. That also puts us at a total expense of $60.50. We're getting close, but we still have some wiggle room. So let's go to install and... Some of you eagle-eyed and technically savvy folks probably saw this issue coming. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, the stock power supply for the 9020 has only a maximum capacity of 290 watts. For a gaming rig, that's pitiful. The power supply doesn't even have PCIe wires. For context, a machine with specs like the one I'm intending recommend at least a 500-watt power supply, and we only have a budget of $8.50 left. That's a problem. Checking eBay, you're lucky to find a power supply that's listed as broken or for parts for less than $10. Fortunately, I am not beaten. You see, I was very particular in my wording at the very start of the video about finding parts for free. One fine day, I was walking around at a local electronics store, and they were cleaning out their inventory of old and defunct parts. Among the trash was a tower that was in very poor condition, However, I saw it as an opportunity and asked if I could take it, to which they obliged. They were probably just happy to have the space back. One afternoon of scrubbing with a whole bunch of alcohol wipes and liberal use of a screwdriver layer, I had a whole bunch of parts, including this 650-watt power supply. I don't know much about it, other than I've had it in 2 consecutive builds for testing purposes, and can confidently state that it comes with the features of not bursting into flame or exploding when it's running. All excellent features to have. Best of all, the only costs were my time, a little elbow grease, and a willingness to take a chance. So with that in mind, let's install our, finger quotes, new power supply. God damn it. When it comes to purpose-built PCs, I hate companies, especially Dell. You know why? Proprietary wire hookups. Instead of using standard ports or hookups that are utilized among the average consumer PC, gaming-specific and professional-oriented PCs are built either to save costs or prevent independent consumer tinkering. I'm well aware of Dell's shenanigans after working on my friend's Alienware Aurora R6 by attempting to upgrade it, breaking it, fixing it, and then selling it. After, of course, I gave him a replacement computer. When it comes to the Optiplex 9020 instead of the standard 24-pin motherboard connector, we are cursed with this 8-pin perversion. Now, while there are conversion charts and I could just butcher and solder the 24-pin, I don't have the soldering skills to back that up. Fortunately, we are not down and out. Referring again to the abundance of Optiplexes and people like me repurposing them, it only makes sense that the market would respond in kind with adapters that are readily available. The best part, I found one for almost exactly $8.50. Alright, back to the graphics card. We'll get that in, install the GeForce Experience program, and see how well we can play. First up, Cult of the Lamb. Yes, I do like this game, shut up. Since my storage is at a premium with a 250GB SSD being mostly occupied by games, I opted for external captures. Forgive me if there's some mild quality issues, but at least you can tell it's not running on anything else but the $69 computer. Cult of the Lamb ran with no issues. Plugging in an Xbox controller was seamless, and I was off to gain minions and followers with no hiccups or stutters. God, I love the GTX 960. 60 frames per second the whole way through. Next up was Team Fortress 2. Again, no problems. A steady 120 frames per second, responsive controls, reasonable loading times, and the satisfaction of being able to play unrestricted even if it wasn't enough to carry the team I was on. Seriously, for a 17-year-old game, it still slaps on almost any hardware. Third on the list, we have one I don't pay too much attention to with Rocket League. Being an esports title, it's reasonable to expect that most computers that can handle Windows 10 can handle this. Me having only played Rocket League twice in the past, I may not have been the most coordinated on the field, but any shortcomings were my own. The Optiplex ran fine. For our fourth title, we return to Doom 2016. This one required a little tweaking, but on medium settings, I ran a steady 60 frames per second, and the carnage was ever so satisfying. Jeez, I really should finally get around to playing Doom Eternal. For the last game I tested, Choo Choo Charles, I went with something a little more indie, but gave me some surprises when I booted it up. First was the fact that the game was preset to run on ultra settings. Not terrible, but struggling to maintain a consistent 30 frames per second, so I slapped the presets down to medium. In response, the frame rate almost doubled. Perfectly playable and ready for some raucous railroad rampaging. And there it is, a successful $69 build. Come back next week, where I'll be upgrading a few core components, showing how it can be made perfectly capable to run modern stuff, and then, on top of all of that, I give it away. Hey, thanks for sticking around all the way to the end. Remember that I give away Steam keys with my regular weekly uploads, and all you have to do to enter is leave a comment and have contact info on your YouTube profile. But as always, thanks for watching, and keep your head on your shoulders.